which will bring us to our next team, which is the New York Knicks. Their key free agents are only Josh Hart, has a $13 million player option. We all expect him to decline. Both Emmanuel Quickly and Obi Toppin are extension eligible. Those negotiations, insofar as they happen, will be pretty interesting. Looking at like just a snapshot of their cap situation, they should be able to carry Josh Hart's hold and then use the bigger MLE. And that's assuming they decline Derrick Rose's team option. No notable trade exceptions for them. I have their biggest need as shooting that cracks the closing lineup, which is, we can get into that. I feel like that's fairly more complicated than people credit, or just they need a top 20 player. Like they need I don't want to say that Jalen Brunson is so good. I still firmly believe, I'll say they need another star, but I actually think that they need another best player.
Mm-hmm.
So what are you thinking about with this team as we head into their offseason?
I think that when I was trying to think of, well, what do they need? What can they get? I came back to like a bigger question that I want to get your take on. I'm curious what you think. So I'm going to answer your question with a question, I guess, basically. It feels to me like, yes, they need shooting that can close. Like, that's clear. I just wonder if the roster construction, specifically having Julius Randle and, I mean, Mitchell Robinson's on a good deal. I'm wearing a shirt that apologizes to him, so we don't have any. There's no uncertainty about that. It feels like Randle and kind of to a lesser extent RJ Barrett sort of make it really difficult to upgrade the team in the ways you'd want to upgrade it, especially on the shooting front. Because, like, could you just like, again, this isn't going to happen. I'm just using him as an example because he's top of mind. Like, if Cam Johnson were in the Randle spot, doesn't that just make more sense? Doesn't that work better, like roster construction wise? I feel like Randle being there makes it hard to build the type of lineup you want to close games. So is that like an oversimplification? Is that unfair? Is there another way you can get the shooter out there that you need and that you want to close games?
In theory, if Tibbs was willing to field a different kind of five, which is to say, could you try closing with Randle at the five? Would be something.
Yeah, which I don't love that.
No. So that's a great point to think about. And I kind of always framed it as, well, when you look at who's guaranteed to be in there, it's Julius Randle, a big, but Mitchell Robinson, let's say, and then Jalen Brunson. And as you technically have two spots, but you also have Josh Hart and Quickly and RJ Barrett and Quentin Grimes. And you need someone who very clearly is going to usurp those guys. But I'm with you in the sense that, yeah, he could, because if you're not going to play Randle at the five, then the only thing you could do is, okay, well, we need a floor spacing rim protector at the five. And there are like 3 to 5 of those in the league, legitimately. And we also know Tibbs doesn't necessarily like to play those types of guys, which limits you even further. That's why it's so tough, though, to get shooting that cracks. Because I do think that you could, we'll get into targets, but maybe you could swing a sign and trade for Gary Trent Jr., and that's great. I think he would be a good fit. I don't think he's going to necessarily, he's not going to crack every closing lineup. That's why I almost default to this team needs like that big time acquisition. It's not going to be anyone in free agency who does that for them, because I feel like, yes, they could get someone who will play and who can shoot, but will that player also be one of their top 5 guys? Probably not.
That's the central problem. Like, because even Gary Trent Jr. is kind of like a reach, right? In terms of like what you could afford to go sign.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. They're not, and they can't, it would have to be a sign and trade. Yeah.
Right. And he's not definitely going to be the better option than like Quickly or Barrett or even like Quentin Grimes night to night. Like some nights maybe, but like that's not, you don't stretch and you do a bunch of crazy roster contortions to go get a guy that like kind of just fits into that lump of, well, this guy could close if he's running right and the matchups are favorable. Like that's just, you just need to get the guy that 100% against anyone and everyone is in the closing lineup. And that's a trade. That's just like, that's a blockbuster trade. That's what that has to be.
When you're getting into actual free agency targets, does anyone stand out? Again, we're not predicting anyone would crack the closing lineup based on who's available and who they could afford, but any fits?
Yeah. Well, you've really swayed me with their need for a caps lock shooter, and Seth Curry, I think, is, he's 5th all time among guys with a lot of attempts from deep. He's falls into that same bucket of like, he's not definitely closing over Quickly or whoever. So he's not a perfect fix, but if you're just addressing the shooting, he's the free agent that like jumps to mind. I like him more than someone like, other accurate guys like Ingles or, Kevin Love or whatever. But like Seth Curry doesn't move the needle, I don't think so. I'd be curious what you've got if you've got a free agent, or certainly if you've got a trade, I would love to hear it.
Oh man, we can get into trades. Like, just you should be. Well, my free agent target would be Max Strus. I don't know is he going to get more than the MLE, and I don't think I wouldn't predict him to close games over. So you have to close games over, let's say, 3 of RJ Barrett, Quentin Grimes, Emmanuel Quickly, and Josh Hart. I don't know. It's not implausible that because he has size, he's not the biggest sieve on defense. And if his 3-pointer is going, that's hyper valuable.
Yeah.
But you kind of get into the one, I wouldn't guarantee it. And 2, $12 million a year or whatever it ends up being. Does he get more? Does he get less? Are the Heat less inclined to pay him because they have Duncan Robinson? I just don't know whether he's in MLE territory, like, or above it.
It's hard to say. I think the dimension he would bring, especially with his like movement shooting, would be really helpful for the Knicks, I think. But again, like, it's not like he's a career like 42% 3-point shooter. He's he has some rough nights, and we keep coming back to the same idea. He's not the guy. He's not the star as good or better than Brunson acquisition that I think you've been on them needing for like since before the Brunson deal, really. Like,
and what's so wild is when you go through trade targets, some of the ones that I think the caps lock stars that are most likely to become available, I don't know that you sit out those negotiations if they do become available, but they're no longer players that you're like, well, the Knicks need to get them. If it's Karl Anthony Towns, you can't have Karl Anthony Towns and Julius Randle on the same team. And so I guess you could be moving Julius Randle's part of that deal. The other thing I'll say is, even if they don't get a star, I would look at moving Randle. I don't think the Knicks are going to suck again if they don't trade Randle. I don't think it's mission critical. I do wonder if for them to be a contender, whether he can be a part of it. But if they don't move him, I don't think it's the end of the world. I think it's going to end up, and I'll phrase it this way. I would 100% trade Julius Randle, probably for less than the Knicks would. But I'm going to end the offseason. My level-headed approach will be, I'll look back and say, I wish they looked more thoroughly at moving Julius Randle than they did. I won't kill them for it, but I just don't think I guess if the right opportunity comes along, but I don't like saying selling humans. That's terrible. But I would trade Julius Randle for a package that maybe isn't as immediately focused, because I think that you'd be able to swing other moves or replace a lot of what he can do. Yeah. And so I don't think they're going to do that though. But the names like Trae Young, Dame Lillard, because Jalen Brunson's there, it's, yeah, okay, I guess you could trade Jalen Brunson for one of them, but are is it enough of an upgrade to justify, okay, we're going to consolidate on top of our best player? It's just a weird spot to be in. And it's just like, Paul George for this roster would be great. There's been no inclination that he's available. Like, things could go off the wall in New Orleans with Zion Williamson. It's kind of like, okay, well, you have to look at it, but we just talked about how they need all this shooting. And like, that's not going to be Zion Williamson. That's, of course, an extreme example. Are there any prospective available stars that, like, even if Pascal Siakam becomes available, is that someone who would intrigue you if you're New York? Like, are there any big names that you could see feasibly, like, even not even super feasibly, but like within a long shot hitting the open market where it's okay, like, that's the guy the Knicks need to go after? Because everyone will say, oh, Devin Booker or Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Those are guys that do not even fall in a million years bucket right now. And so that's what's so tough about this exercise.
No, I don't have any. I'm just trying to think, like, who's Steph? Possibly tradable. Well, I did have like the flash thought of like Klay Thompson. Maybe they're fine with paying him a ton of money for 1 year, but then what are the Knicks sending to the Warriors that would, like, I just don't feel like he's going to be traded. Gosh, that's just, I don't know. I don't have a good answer. I guess you just wait for Donovan Mitchell to inevitably sign there in a couple of years.
It's funny because you've almost made it harder on yourself by being this good, or the way that your roster's set up. You kind of need a very specific type of star now. I would argue they need to play like the 2-3 or the 4. And like, that's like what everyone's looking for.
Right. Real quick. I'm curious. Do you think either Quickly or Toppin get extensions? Because this isn't like they're not facing restricted free agency. Like, which is more likely to get it, and what numbers are you okay with?
Quickly, I think probably between like 15 and 20 is fine for Quickly, right? Is that too high? Would you go?
I think I'd be okay with that. I mean, he plays like a premium position the
playoffs are concerning. His performance.
Yeah. Toppin, though, I think is a tricky one, because I'm not sure what his future is.
I would be, and I'm assuming you're in the same camp, I would be shocked if Toppin gets extended.
I don't know what would be in it for the Knicks to extend him. Like, I think he's still in him.
Because like I
Well,
feel like he's repressing his value by staying in a place where he's never going to average like more than 17 or 18 minutes a game.
yeah. Well, what does it take for him to say to accept an extension then? Not that the Knicks would offer it, but like if he gets offered 12 million a year, does he take it? Like, is he doing better than that in
I
restricted
think
free agency
you would
next summer?
probably have to take it if you're him, right?
I don't know. I just threw the number out. It's somewhere in that range, I think. Because
I
like,
couldn't, I'm not going to roll the dice if I'm not going to take like mid-level money, but I don't know if 12, 13 millions, if mid-level money's on the table, I don't know how you turn it down and bet on yourself when it's a team that you don't see a pathway, so long as Julius Randle's there, to your
yeah,
role expanding.
when the team won't bet on you, basically, won't give you the opportunity.
I will say, I don't think either of them are going to get extended because I think
Okay.
that the Knicks are going to want to keep their trade options open throughout the season. And it's going to get, I think quickly will probably appeal to more teams,
Mm-hmm.
but it gets hard to move either one of them if they sign those extensions.
Okay.
Excuse me.